What if I told you one of the most powerful voices in hip-hop never truly reached the mainstream? Not because he lacked skill, not because he lacked an audience, but because of what he chose to speak about and who he chose to speak for. This is the story of Lowkey, a rapper whose music wasn't just heard, it was felt, challenged, and at times, avoided.
The strength of your dreaming prevents you from reason. The American dream only makes sense if you're sleeping. It's just a cruel fantasy. Their politics took my voice away, but their music gave it back to me. The land where the lumpen are consumed by consumption, killing themselves to shovel down food in abundance. I guess a rapper from Britain is a rare voice. America is capitalism on steroids.
Lowkey, born Kareem Dennis in London to an Iraqi mother and an English father, didn't just grow up between two cultures. He grew up between two completely different realities. Inside the home, there were stories of Iraq. Not just culture, but conflict, history, and struggle. Outside, there was London, a city moving at its own pace, largely disconnected from those realities. And for a young Lowkey, that contrast wasn't abstract, it was constant. Then came 2003, the year that would define not just global politics, but his perspective on the world. The Iraq War began. Led by the United States and supported by the United Kingdom, it was presented to the public as a necessary intervention, a response to supposed weapons of mass destruction. But those weapons were never found, and what followed wasn't stability, it was destruction. Bombings, civilian casualties, millions displaced. A country destabilized for years to come. And while this was being debated on television, for Lowkey, it wasn't a debate. It was his mother's homeland, his identity being discussed in headlines, reduced to sound bites, while he lived with the emotional weight of what that actually meant. At a time when millions marched through London in protest, voices like his were still missing from the conversation. So when Lowkey began rapping, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from frustration, from observation, from a need to respond to a world that was already speaking about him, without ever hearing from him.
Wait for the chorus. Listen. Okay. Yo. Police shot an innocent man 5 times in the head. No militant plans aside because he ran frightened and fled. Do they really want us to riot and ride on his bed? Yeah, maybe violence will have the desired effect. The other day they killed a man on the tube is ill. If you was found, imagine how you would feel. On the news, you never see the truth revealed. Facing the truth is the ruthless racist streets to kill. It's all gone wild. They got us locked down in compounds. Evidence is not found. No trial needs to stop now. Then they got the nerve to say we're hostile. Forget crack houses, they're raiding mosques now.
At just 12 years old, he was stepping into open mic spaces. Not with polished industry ambition, but with something far more powerful: perspective. And in rooms where expectations were low, he stood out. Not just because he could rap, but because of what he was saying. Around this time, he was also part of a collective known as Poisonous Poets, a group rooted in the UK underground scene, alongside names like Doc Brown and Tony D, artists known for lyricism, substance, and technical ability, in a scene where message still mattered. That environment didn't just support Lowkey, it sharpened him. It reinforced the kind of artist he was becoming, long before the wider world was paying attention. Then came a track that would define his early career, Obama Nation. At a time when Barack Obama was widely celebrated, seen as a symbol of hope, change, and progress, Lowkey took a different approach. He questioned the system behind the image. He spoke about war, foreign policy, and power structures, and the gap between political rhetoric and reality. It wasn't just controversial, it was uncomfortable, because it forced listeners to think. But to understand Lowkey fully, you have to look beyond the politics, into something far more personal: loss. Lowkey lost his older brother, and that kind of loss doesn't just disappear, it stays, in thoughts, in memory, in silence. In Bars for My Brother, you don't hear performance, you hear someone trying to process something that never fully made sense. There's no ego, no image, just honesty.
Yeah. Yo. I hope you're somewhere listening to this. I wish I knew why you did what you did, cause I still haven't really come to terms with the truth. There must have been something you were determined to prove. The lessons you taught me, I can't forget them, but there's so many unanswered questions. Now everything seems meaningless. You lived fast and died young, but my brother, you were a genius. How could you ever believe that you survived? I don't care what they say, that shit was suicide, I won't lie. There was much distance between you and I should have told you not to do it, don't be stupid. You got looks, got brains, and your future's bright. Now you're gone, I feel like I'm gonna lose my mind. I never thought you'd get yourself organised. I wish we saw the signs, the shot left us all traumatised. These are awful times, and I need more than rhymes, cause this was more than a tragedy. You can't just cheat the forces of gravity. You left me here to hold a brave face, supporting the family. In a way, you were dying to live. It's fucked up, man, I'm crying while I'm writing this shit. Water from my eyes stopping me from lighting my spliff. Why didn't you realise that your life was a gift? Mum and dad don't understand why they've outlived their son. Every single CD, mixtape and album to come is dedicated to none other than my blood brother. But I hate you for the way you made my mum suffer. Words can't explain how a certain part of my heart hurts with the harshest pain. Last time we spoke I said we weren't brothers and we aren't the same. I told myself you were too far past insane. How could we not take your death badly? I just asked mum and she said your name meant happy. But my soul's too cold to laugh. My heart bleeds while I'm looking at your old school photograph. I wish that I could touch your beautiful flesh. I'm writing but we ain't even had the funeral yet. Now death is something that I'm staying ever ready for. You had plenty more to give, you weren't even 24. I don't understand why you had to die. In a lot of rappers' rhymes, death is glamorized. Not me, I'll always stay remembering you. I should've known this was something you'd eventually do. When you got a shift, we should've known it was bad. The next day I was sitting here consoling my dad. It's like a nightmare, it still doesn't seem real. But this is my life, not some fucking deep film.
And in Haunted, that grief evolves. It becomes something that lingers, something that follows him through every verse, every stage, every silence. And when you carry something like that, your relationship with the world changes. You don't just see injustice, you feel it.
My brother died when I was 18, now I'm 24 and I keep having the same dream. My days seem to pass fast, but now I hate sleep, so when they say stay free, I really know what they mean. Just remember I was destined to fail. At every level they tell you the rebels will never prevail. Heaven or hell, whatever the weather, you never can tell. You know you've lost a loved one when you remember their smell. I was born to fight oppression, but I'm traumatized and stressing with this borderline depression. Swear I'm haunted by your presence. You get all of my confessions. Pray the Lord provides his blessing, and I soar as high as heaven, but it's sorta like I'm guessing.
And that feeling became action. Lowkey didn't limit himself to music. He became involved in real-world activism, supporting causes, speaking at events, and engaging directly with the issues he rapped about. From Palestine to anti-war movements, he wasn't observing from a distance, he was present. But there are limits to how far certain messages travel within the mainstream. Lowkey's music demanded attention, context, and thought, and in an industry driven by accessibility, that comes at a cost. At the height of his momentum, Lowkey stepped away. Not for headlines, not for strategy, but to focus on work beyond music. And when he returned, the voice hadn't changed, but the world had. Lowkey never became the most commercially successful artist, but success depends on how you define it, because hip-hop was never just about music, it was about truth, expression, and giving a voice to those who are often unheard. And whether the mainstream embraced him or not, Lowkey remained exactly that. A voice that refused to be silenced. There's a reason you don't hear Lowkey everywhere. Not because he lacks skill, but because of what he speaks about. Truth isn't always promoted. Sometimes it's silenced. Lowkey remains one of the most censored voices in modern hip-hop, but hip-hop was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to challenge. So supporting him isn't just supporting an artist, it's supporting what hip-hop is supposed to be. A voice for the voiceless. You'll find him on Double Down News and through Global Faction. So if you believe in real hip-hop, support the voices they try to silence.
His young life was as delicate as the wing of a butterfly and as fragile as a spider's web. For him we cry, 'cause when he dies,
We all do. Did Ahmed not deserve a life? Ahmed never hurt a fly. Ahmed never knew the politicians he was murdered by. Certain times Ahmed wished that he could be a bird and fly beyond the sky, escape the curse of birth that he was burdened by. Ahmed never grew to let your racism internalize. Water poured from every pore in his corpse while the nurses cried. Ahmed was a beautiful person, like you or I. But are we? Ahmed could have been a doctor, lawyer or an engineer. Could have been a superstar, but his life ended here. Guess he was a shooting star, burned bright and disappeared. To some he seems to represent a menace in this hemisphere. Let me hear, make the very essence of this message clear. He was precious, many die like him every year. Ahmed was a victim of resentment and relentless fear. Now his soul surfs the waves, I wish we could have kept him here.
The sea, the sea, the sea, it holds our secrets. The sea, the sea, the sea, it holds his soul. They call him Ahmed. The sea, the sea, the sea, it holds our secrets.